keep confusing the two buttons. Scientific research, definitely that's a new interest, not in terms of very narrow weather research, but also in terms of space research, because we know China has a very ambitious space program, not in terms of launching rockets from the pole, because we know that would be very costly. You probably want to launch the rockets from the equator, as close as the equator, rather than, but it's good for research. So the general approach is to diversify research, to deepen the research, to spend more on the research. Strategic interest, particularly the military literature, talks a lot about the benefits of the Arctic Ocean, in terms of concealment, in terms of the bad weather, in terms of shortened early warning, because we know China has a pretty robust, nuclear strategic submarine program. They just built 4 boats, a couple of them are pretty advanced in terms of submarine-based, submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Except, I don't think they are really put on patrol, and also they feel that these boats are so exposed and vulnerable, they had to deploy them to Hainan Island, because logically they were supposed to deploy them up north. Except the Yellow Sea and the East China Sea are kind of shallow, so they are too exposed and vulnerable. And also Japan and the U.S. has very robust, anti-submarine capabilities. So they decided to move them down south. But anyway, as long as China continue to research on these programs, there are efforts to find ways how to use them, how to deploy them, how to conceal them, to achieve the element of surprise, and that sort of that enhances deterrence. That sort of thinking definitely is in the Chinese psyche. Accounting for change, there are a few factors. There's no question. The first presentation talked about global warming. Definitely, that contributes to Chinese change of thinking on these issues. Global warming, also increased dependence on external resources because of rapid Chinese economic growth. We all know that. And finally, there are lots of reference to the rivalries, but except so far we from the previous presentation seems lots of them are based on exaggerations, and we know getting published in China is also driven by profit incentive. There are lots of sensational stories out there. So definitely, there are lots of reference about Russian Arctic unit being established, the Canadian military exercises, and so on and so forth, and integration of Arctic, into the national security strategy, homeland security strategy, by different powers. That sort of reference, and for those who analyze international relations, definitely that's one of the drivers, that contributes to arms race, security dilemma, that sort of spiral effect, that's pretty, conventional wisdom. What else? Another driver has to do with analytical literature. It seems most of the Chinese analysts took this very pessimistic view about the Arctic issues. Particularly, they look at the behavior of the Arctic states, Arctic coastal states, and they basically reach the conclusion that most of these states, they take this very unilateral approach in terms of exploiting the EEZ rights, and also exploiting the continental shelf extension principle, to try to extend their jurisdiction in terms of exclusive economic zone, and also the continental shelf extension principle. They particularly highlight, these countries, they try to extend, as long as you do research to establish your continental shelf extension, could extend as far as you can, and then you can claim extra, as not just 200 miles, but also as high as 350 nautical miles of EEZ. So that's sort of very, basically that has to do with the Sea of the Law Treaty, and also in terms of obligation, particularly they highlight the contrast between the Arctic, the behavior with regard to the Arctic as to Antarctic, because we know there is an Antarctic treaty that involves a lot of obligations in terms of denuclearization, demilitarization, scientific research cooperation, but not as far as the Arctic issues are concerned. So that's the Chinese interpretation that probably drive the Chinese concern about Arctic. Finally, the leadership endorsement, that's very important in China. And what's interesting, we got China got a new leader, Party Secretary Hu Jintao, and basically he promoted this idea that the military is not just supposed to protect Chinese traditional security domains such as territorial sovereignty, integrity, issue of Taiwan, because those are the issues that Jiang Zemin had focused on. Hu Jintao suggested something further than that, particularly the concept of development interest, in terms of space, cyber, outer space, virtual space, as well as maritime interests. So in that sense, different bureaucracies, they go out and try to flesh out what that means. So logically, the military bureaucracy, the SOAR, State Oceanic Administration, they began to operationalize, to flesh out these specific programs to flesh out the concept of development interest. So that's one of the, except there are lots of constraints. First of all, look at the Chinese capabilities. The sole icebreaker, out there, has been operating for the past 15 years. Except, there are limitations. First of all, in terms of ice breaking, it's very limited. It has a single screw. Could only break the ice as thick as 1.2 meters, as we know. Except if the ice melts, it becomes more effective. But at this point, that's still a question out there. Other than that, it's overly tasked. We know that this sole icebreaker being deployed to do different things, transfer personnel, materials, also scientific research. It took trip to Antarctic, for 15 times, 3 times to the Arctic. So it's overly tasked. So that's one of the limitations. Other than that, the naval capability. Look at the Chinese Navy is being. Has been trying to build up, except, still in terms of power projection, doesn't have aircraft carriers, and this particular to talk about aircraft carriers is indispensable, particularly in terms of a floating platform. Particularly, China doesn't have overseas military bases. How do you sustain these naval operations if you don't have logistics? Some military analysts compare this particular problem to the weekly offensive during the Korean War. It could only go as far as a week, and then your logistics lag behind. The whole offensive collapsed. Operational experience, as we know, the Chinese military has traditionally been a continental, sort of force. It doesn't really have a lot of experience in naval operations. So in a sense, the Gulf of Aden mission is good for China because it really try to gain operational experience. Other than that, we know harsh environment for infrastructure of the Arctic region, particularly the Russian sealand management, because if you talk about Northeast Passage, you have to pass through the Russian territorial waters, and you have to probably pay a fee. You have to go through the very complex process of permit applications. That's those sorts of problems, and they could be problematic for China to exploit that Northeast Passage. Except, as we know, if the ice continues to melt, then you could go up north, and then you go through the ice-free waters, and then that makes it easier. Thank you.
Thank you very much.